If you're lying in the quiet of night, eyes half closed, mind adrift, welcome. Tonight, we won't offer certainty. We won't argue what's right or wrong. Instead, we'll drift through ideas, some beautiful, some terrifying. These are the most controversial philosophies ever conceived, thoughts so bold they unsettled centuries of belief. Some of them whisper that life has no meaning. Some shout that morality is a myth. Some question the value of birth or the existence of truth itself. And some, quietly, teach us how to be still amidst chaos. Each idea is a doorway into a world where the ground shifts and nothing is sacred. You may not agree. You don't have to. But for the next few hours, let them speak. Let them challenge, soothe, disturb, or awaken something deep within. We begin where many have stood, alone, free, and searching for meaning. This is existentialism. Imagine this. It's late. The world is asleep. Outside your window, the sky stretches wide and indifferent, stars blinking in silence, scattered like ancient thoughts. You lie awake, wondering, what am I doing here? Not just here, in this bed, in this hour, but here in the world. On this spinning planet, inside this body, carrying this name. That moment, raw, unsettling, lonely, is where existentialism begins. It doesn't begin with definitions or dusty books. It begins with the ache of being alive and not knowing what it means. The feeling that nothing is truly certain, that you are somehow untethered, like a ship in open water, no lighthouse in sight. For the existentialists, this wasn't a flaw in life. It was life. Soren Kierkegaard, often considered the father of this strange and beautiful outlook, once stood before a church in Denmark and wept, not because he rejected God, but because he feared a life lived without true inner commitment. He believed that despair wasn't some rare affliction. It was everywhere, in routines, in shallow beliefs, in the comfort of crowds. For Kierkegaard, despair came when we forgot to become ourselves. Then came Nietzsche, wild and furious, like lightning cracking across the calm. He didn't cry before churches. He set fire to them, at least in spirit. God is dead, he declared, not to shock, but to warn. The foundations of meaning, he said, had crumbled. What we once held sacred, religion, morality, truth, had lost their power. And now we stood on the edge of a terrifying freedom. No gods, no maps, just us. Camus, with his quiet melancholy, saw this condition and gave it a name: the absurd. Imagine a man rolling a boulder up a hill, only for it to fall again, endlessly. That was Sisyphus, and Camus said, we are all him. We wake, work, love, hope, and yet the universe says nothing back. It offers no meaning, no applause, just silence. So what do? Give up? Drift? Surrender? Not at all, Camus whispered. Instead, imagine Sisyphus smiling. This, perhaps, is the heart of existentialism. It does not promise comfort. It doesn't wrap us in meaning or soothe us with answers. It holds our gaze and says, life may have no meaning. So what will you do with that? It's a strange freedom to be told that nothing matters. At first, it feels cold, cruel, but sit with it long enough and it becomes something else, liberating, even tender. Because if there is no script, no fate, no divine plan, then every choice is yours. Every path is unwritten. You are not a character in someone else's story. You are the author. Jean-Paul Sartre called this existence before essence. We are not born with a purpose. We simply are. And only later, through action, through struggle, through decision, do we become something. That's why existentialism always returns to responsibility. Not in a stern moralizing way, but with quiet urgency. You are free, it says, radically, frighteningly free. No one can tell you what to do, who to be, what to believe. And that freedom, it's yours to carry. But here's the twist. With that freedom comes anxiety. Sartre called it nausea, a kind of spiritual dizziness. When we realize there's no ground beneath us, we tremble. We hesitate. We wish sometimes that someone else would choose for us. But existentialism gently refuses to do that. It waits patiently for us to decide. And sometimes in the middle of that silence we do. Not with grand declarations, but in small human ways. We forgive someone. We tell the truth. We choose love, even though we're afraid. We make art, raise children, start over, stay alive, not because it's required, but because we chose it. And in that choice, meaning is born. So when people say existentialism is dark, they're only seeing half the picture. Yes, it begins in the shadows, in loneliness, absurdity, doubt, but it doesn't end there. It invites us to light our own candles, to build meaning from the ground up, even if our hands shake. And in that act, something beautiful happens. Imagine a man walking alone through a forest at night. There is no path, no signs, but with each step, he presses the soil beneath him and a path begins to form. Not because it was there, but because he walked it. That's existentialism. Life has no meaning until you walk it into being. Albert Camus once wrote, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." That's what this philosophy offers. Not salvation, not answers, but the quiet courage to keep walking, even in winter, to live even when it hurts, to love even when it might not last. And maybe that's enough. Maybe on some silent night with the stars still watching, you'll feel it too, that soft defiance, that trembling freedom. And you'll know, I exist, I choose, I am becoming. Let's stay in that space a while longer. Now breathe, let the thoughts settle. And when you're ready, we'll move gently onward into a philosophy that stares directly into the void and does not look away. It is darker, colder, and far less forgiving. This is nihilism. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the world feels hollow. You're doing all the things you were told to do. You wake up, brush your teeth, go to work, smile when you're supposed to, laugh at the right jokes, eat dinner, go to sleep. And yet, something doesn't fit. Something feels artificial, like a set piece in a play you no longer believe in. You start to wonder, what is this for? What is any of it for? And the silence that answers back, that deep, echoing silence, is the doorway to nihilism. This is not a philosophy that shouts. It does not come banging on the door demanding to be heard. It slips in quietly, in the spaces between things. In the moment you finish a long project and feel nothing. In the second after a celebration, when everyone's smiling and you're already drifting away. In that lonely place where the rituals of life no longer carry meaning and the gods no longer answer. Nihilism is the sense that nothing, truly nothing, has intrinsic value. Not love, not truth, not even life itself. It is the collapse of all the scaffolding we've built to protect ourselves from the void. And once it begins to crack, the weight of it is unlike anything else. You might think it would lead to chaos, to destruction, madness, or rage. And sometimes it does. But often, nihilism manifests more quietly. A numbness, a withdrawal, a tired, aching kind of detachment. It's not so much a scream as it is a whisper. None of this matters. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He didn't invent nihilism. He saw it coming, like a storm on the horizon, growing darker each year. The death of God, he said, wasn't a victory or a rebellion. It was a tragedy. Because without that guiding light, we were left to drift, unanchored, alone. The old values were fading, but we had not yet found new ones. We were suspended in between. Others would feel this too, though in different shades. Émile Cioran, for instance, didn't rail against meaninglessness. He drank it slowly, like a bitter wine. His words were soaked in sorrow and dark beauty. He once wrote, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late." Not a call for death, but a lament for life's unbearable delay in giving us something to hold on to. To embrace nihilism is not to celebrate despair. It is to sit with it, to recognize that perhaps there is no grand purpose behind the stars, no cosmic justice, no eternal truth, that our morals are inventions, our beliefs are temporary. Even our identities, so carefully constructed, can fall away in an instant. And yet, this recognition, this stark, brutal honesty, has its own kind of purity. There is no room for illusion in nihilism. It does not flatter, it does not comfort, but it is real. And in that rawness, there can be strange peace. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, nothing behind you, nothing in front, just wind and stone and sky. Of course, not everyone survives this view. Some turn inward, lost in depression or apathy. Others turn violent, deciding that if nothing matters, then cruelty is as valid as kindness. But those are not the only paths. There is also another way, a quieter path, one that does not deny the void, but walks beside it. You see, nihilism does not have to end in despair. If nothing has meaning, then we are free to create our own. If no value is absolute, then we are not bound by inherited lies. If the universe is indifferent, then we are not beholden to anyone's expectations. In that emptiness, there is room to build, room to breathe, room to become. This, perhaps, is the strange hope hiding in nihilism. Not the naive hope of religion or the structured hope of ideology, but a fragile, flickering kind of hope. one that knows everything is temporary and decides to care anyway, one that sees the absurdity of existence and still chooses to laugh, to love, to create, to be. It is not an easy way to live. It requires courage, the kind that does not need applause. The kind that wakes up each morning and says, yes, I know it's all dust, but I'm here anyway. And maybe that's what makes it beautiful. Because when nothing is promised, everything becomes precious. A shared glance, the softness of a pillow, the way the sunlight hits a floor you forgot to clean. These things, so small, so fleeting, become sacred not because they last, but because they don't. Nihilism clears the table. It takes away all the ornaments and pretenses and leaves you with bare wood and silence. And in that stillness, something stirs, a quiet will to live, not out of duty or fear or faith, but simply because you're here. And that somehow is enough. So if you ever find yourself staring into the void, don't look away. Sit with it, breathe, feel the weight of nothing pressing against your chest. And then, softly, whisper back, I see you, I accept you, but I will live anyway. Nihilism may never give you answers. It may never soothe the ache of being. But it can offer you something just as rare, honesty, freedom, and the haunting beauty of a life lived without illusion. Now rest. Let the thought pass through you like wind. Let the silence settle again. And when you're ready, we'll turn to a different kind of rebellion, a philosophy that doesn't destroy meaning, but deconstructs it entirely, word by word, voice by voice. Next, we drift into the labyrinth of postmodernism. Let's begin, not with a definition, but with a feeling. You're walking through a museum, a vast hall of mirrors. Each one reflects something familiar, but also slightly distorted. You turn to look closer, and you realize the walls are made of words. Some written in stone, some scribbled in chalk, others barely legible, melting like rain on glass. You reach out to steady yourself, but nothing is solid for long. Everything moves. Everything speaks in riddles. You are in the realm of postmodernism, and it does not want to be understood. You see, postmodernism is not here to explain the world. It is here to ask why we ever believed we could. It doesn't whisper truths or offer shelter from confusion. It tears down the stage while the play is still being performed, then asks whether the audience was ever real to begin with. This is not a comfortable space, but it is a necessary one. There was a time when the world seemed to fit inside clear, bright lines. Science pointed north, religion pointed upward, and history told us where we came from and where we were going. There were stories, big stories, sweeping narratives that said, this is truth, this is progress, this is who you are. But postmodernism arrived like a quiet wind, and with it came questions. What if those stories weren't truth, but power disguised as truth? What if history isn't a straight line, but a spiral, or a maze, or a collage of forgotten voices? What if language doesn't describe the world, but creates it? And suddenly, nothing is stable. You start to notice the cracks in the facade. The words we use, justice, freedom, identity, are not eternal. They shift depending on who speaks them and to whom. You realize that behind every claim of objectivity, there is a speaker, a perspective, a motive. There is no view from nowhere, no universal lens. Michel Foucault, with his quiet intensity, once suggested that knowledge is not simply discovered, it is produced. That every system of understanding, from medicine to law to sexuality, is entangled with power. That what we call truth often hides the voices it silences. He was not trying to destroy meaning. He was trying to show how it is made, brick by brick, and who decides where the doors and windows go. And then there was Jacques Derrida, who looked at language as if it were a living thing, fragile, unstable, trembling with contradiction. To him, words could never quite say what they meant. Every sentence carried a shadow, a trail of unspoken implications. Meaning, he said, is always deferred, like a mirage that disappears the closer you come. This is the heart of postmodern thought, a deep suspicion of final answers. It's not about saying nothing matters. It's about realizing that everything matters, but only for a while, and only from a certain angle. It's about seeing that meaning is not given, it's made, negotiated, performed, and sometimes unraveled. That might sound like chaos, and maybe it is, but it's also a kind of freedom. In this world of shifting truths, you're no longer bound by the script. You can step outside the narrative, question the narrator, rewrite the ending. You can notice the margins where the forgotten and excluded whisper their stories. You can learn to read between the lines, not just of books, but of institutions, identities, ideologies. Postmodernism invites you to see the world not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a tapestry of overlapping meanings. Some threads are bright, others frayed. Some patterns clash, others dissolve into each other. It is not neat, it is not tidy, but it is real in its own shimmering way. And what about you, the listener? Where do you stand in this mosaic? Perhaps you've felt this already, even without the words. That sense of being caught between narratives, between identities that don't quite fit, between truths that contradict but both seem somehow real. Maybe you've grown weary of certainty. Maybe you've begun to sense that every time someone tells you what you are, they are also shaping the box they want to keep you in. And maybe that's the gift of postmodernism. Not clarity, but permission. Permission to doubt, to play, to explore the space between meaning and nonsense, to laugh at the seriousness of systems that once towered over you, to create your own voice, knowing full well it will never be perfect, never be permanent, but still worth speaking. Postmodernism doesn't demand faith. It invites awareness, a kind of philosophical humility, the courage to live in questions, the willingness to let go of anchors and drift, even if only for a while, in the wide and tangled sea of interpretation. Of course, there is danger in this too. When everything is relative, how do we fight injustice? When every voice is valid, how do we confront lies? When all truths are deconstructed, can anything be rebuilt? These are not easy questions. Postmodernism doesn't offer easy answers, but perhaps it prepares us for a world where easy answers no longer suffice. A world of noise, of images, of fractured realities and competing truths. A world where being too certain is often more dangerous than being unsure. So here we are, together, late at night, eyes open, minds quiet, wandering through the mirrored corridors of thought. And maybe we don't need to escape the maze. Maybe it's enough to walk it thoughtfully, to notice the walls, the shadows, the soft echoes of meaning as they rise and fall. Tonight, we rest not in the comfort of knowledge, but in the beauty of unknowing. And when morning comes, we'll turn toward a different horizon, one not of language or truth, but of birth and the strange aching question of whether it ever should have happened at all. Next, we step into the cold and unsettling quiet of antinatalism. There's a strange kind of stillness that settles over the world in the middle of the night. Streets are empty, lights flicker faintly behind drawn curtains. Even the air seems to pause, as if holding its breath. And in that hush, sometimes we dare to ask the questions we don't say aloud during the day. Why are we here? And should we have ever been? It's a question so simple, so quiet, that it almost slips past you. But once it takes root, it lingers, like the taste of something bittersweet. That is the shadowland where antinatalism lives, not out of hatred, not out of cynicism, but out of a deeply contemplative kind of compassion, however unsettling it may seem. To understand antinatalism, you must first step outside the usual rhythm of life. The rhythm that says birth is always a blessing, that to create life is to do something inherently good, noble, natural. Antinatalism doesn't shout in protest, it simply pauses and asks, but what if it isn't? What if existence is not a gift, but a burden passed down unknowingly? There's a voice here, soft but firm, that says, to bring someone into this world is to expose them to suffering. Not just scraped knees and sleepless nights, but grief, illness, fear, the weight of meaninglessness, and the ache of losing everything they will ever love. To be born is to be sentenced to die, and in between, to endure 1,000 quiet devastations no one else will ever fully see. David Benatar, one of the most prominent voices of this philosophy, offers a paradox that stirs something deep and difficult in the soul. He says the absence of pain is good, even if no one experiences it. But the absence of pleasure is not bad, unless someone exists to miss it. And so, if a child is never born, no harm is done. But if they are born, harm is inevitable. No matter how good life may seem, it carries with it pain that was never consented to. It's not about the individual experience alone. It's about the asymmetry of creation. That non-existence holds no complaint, no longing, no sorrow. Only those who are thrust into being must carry the weight of living. And in a world as fractured as ours, where cruelty and chaos often slip into the quiet moments of daily life, it's not so difficult to see the logic. Still, this is not a worldview embraced easily. It runs counter to everything we're taught to celebrate. We build monuments to birth, write lullabies for it, wrap it in ceremony and joy. We welcome new life with open arms, and perhaps rightly so. Life, for all its pain, contains beauty too. Laughter that bubbles up unexpectedly, the warmth of another person's hand, a sunset so tender it almost makes you cry. Antinatalism does not deny these moments. It does not argue that life has no joy. But it dares to ask, does the good ever truly outweigh the harm? Or is that just the story we tell ourselves to cope? There's a sorrowful tenderness in this way of seeing the world, a kind of radical empathy, not just for ourselves, but for the unborn, for those who have not yet been cast into the maze of desire and disappointment. It's the belief that to spare someone from suffering is more merciful than to gift them fleeting pleasures wrapped in inevitable loss. You might imagine this as cold, as void of love. But strangely, for many who feel aligned with this view, it's rooted in a love so deep it chooses not to inflict harm, even unintentionally. And yet the idea is haunting. Because if we follow it to its end, what becomes of humanity? If none are born, none will suffer. But none will dance. None will write music. None will lie beneath the stars and wonder what it all means. Is that a price worth paying? Perhaps that is not a question that can be answered in absolutes. Perhaps it's one of those quiet, personal reckonings that arises when you stare too long at the ceiling in the dark, tracing the edges of your own sorrow, and wondering if it was ever worth it. There's no command here, no moral crusade. Antinatalism, at its core, is not about hatred of life. It is about recognizing the enormity of what creation means. It is about looking honestly at the reality we all eventually face, that to live is to suffer, to ache, to long, and to lose. And yet, most of us choose to stay, to keep breathing, keep hoping, keep weaving meaning out of a universe that offers none on its own. That, too, is beautiful. But perhaps, just perhaps, it should not be forced upon another without their say. Late at night, when everything is still, it's easy to feel the weight of this philosophy pressing gently on your chest. It doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't offer salvation. It simply asks you to look closely and to ask yourself, is it truly good to be born? And the answer, if there is one, may not come tonight, or ever. But that's the strange thing about these deep and difficult ideas. They don't always want resolution. Sometimes they simply want to be heard. So here we are, drifting together in the quiet space between meaning and silence. And from here, we look toward another old voice, one that offers calm, discipline, and a different kind of peace, a philosophy that stands still even as the world rages on. Next, we'll find our way into the Stoic heart of Stoicism. There's something ancient in the stillness of night, when the world softens, when nothing demands, nothing shouts, when it feels like you can finally hear your own breath without the weight of everything pressing down on your shoulders. That's where Stoicism begins. Not in silence, exactly, but in the calm you find when you stop running from what is. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a cliff, wind brushing past your face, the ocean stretching wide and endless beneath you. The world is wild and unpredictable, just like the sea below, but you are still. You do not flinch at the waves. You simply breathe. That, in its essence, is the Stoic spirit. Stoicism doesn't ask you to shut off your feelings or bury your heart. It simply invites you to recognize what is within your control and what isn't. And in doing so, to find a kind of peace that doesn't depend on the weather of the world. The Stoics, those old voices echoing from Rome and Athens, weren't trying to escape life. They were trying to live it well, even when it hurt. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor carrying the weight of an empire, wrote quietly to himself at night, reminding his soul not to be ruled by anger, not to be owned by fear. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that no one could take your mind from you, not even when they took everything else. And Seneca, with his calm wisdom, whispered through time that fortune has no real power over the wise. What they shared wasn't a doctrine of detachment, but of presence, of facing things as they are. When pain arrives, acknowledge it. When loss strikes, mourn it. But don't let it define you. Don't build your life around what you cannot keep. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But you and I know how hard that really is, because life pulls us in 1,000 directions, asking us to be everything for everyone. We chase approval, control, success, safety. We fear failure, aging, loneliness, death, And in the middle of all this striving, we forget to ask the most basic question of all. What truly can I control? The Stoics answered, not the world, not other people, not fate, but yourself, your thoughts, your choices, your character. That small, sacred space within you, the way you respond when things fall apart, that is yours. It's a quiet form of strength, not flashy, not grand. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen. The kind that holds its ground when no one's watching, like a tree rooted deep into the earth, unmoved by passing storms. Imagine walking through a day with this mindset. The traffic, the news, the sudden bad news, the misunderstanding with someone you love. Each of them still happens, but inside there's no panic, no fury, just breath. Just the question, can I change this? If not, how do I meet it with grace? This is not about being passive. Stoicism is not surrender, it's clarity. It tells you to act where you can and to do it well, but not to carry the weight of what lies beyond you. You don't have to fix the world, you just have to live in it with integrity. That word, integrity, it matters more than we think. Because the Stoic path isn't one of cold logic, it's one of deep ethics. Live honestly, treat others with kindness even when they don't return it. Stay loyal to your values, even when it costs you. Be the kind of person you'd admire, even when no one applauds you for it. And when grief visits, and it always does, Stoicism doesn't offer false comfort. It offers presence, a way to sit beside your sorrow without letting it drown you, a way to look at loss and say, this too is part of life. I will not pretend it's easy, but I will not turn away. In a world that often tells us to hide our pain, to chase endless pleasure, to seek constant validation, the Stoics offer something quieter and more enduring, a kind of inner steadiness, a trust in your own capacity to endure what must be endured and to let go of what cannot be held. Sometimes when I think of Stoicism, I picture an old lamp in the window of a stone house during a storm. The wind howls, the rain lashes, but the lamp stays lit. It doesn't control the storm, it just keeps shining. Maybe that's all we're asked to do, to live with courage, with dignity, with love that isn't attached to outcome, to meet each moment with full awareness, not clinging, not resisting, just meeting. And slowly in this way, we begin to understand a strange and powerful truth, that peace doesn't come from escaping the world. It comes from standing in the middle of it and knowing who you are, regardless of what happens next. So, as you lie there, wrapped in the hush of night, perhaps ask yourself, what can I truly control? What storm am I fighting that I could simply walk through instead? What would it feel like to let go, not of caring, but of needing things to be different than they are? And if there's something you're carrying tonight, some regret, some anxiety, some longing, imagine setting it down, just for a while. Imagine that you don't need to fix everything before you rest. That maybe, in this moment, just breathing with calm awareness is enough. Because sometimes the strongest thing we can do is simply be still. And with that stillness, we'll drift onward into the next stirring current of thought, where power, injustice, and revolution await. In the next hour, we step into the fire-lit heart of Marxism. If you sit very still, truly still, you might begin to hear it. Not just the hum of the city or the quiet creaks of your home settling into the night, but something deeper. A sound beneath the surface, like the breath of a sleeping giant, or the low rhythmic pulse of something vast and unseen, moving slowly beneath the skin of the world. That, perhaps, is where Marxism begins. Not as a loud manifesto or a revolutionary shout, but as a question murmured in the silence between lives. Why does so much of the world hurt for so many, while a few sleep soundly in palaces built on the tired backs of others? Karl Marx wasn't the first to notice that something was wrong. But he was one of the first to look at the world not just with sorrow, but with a sharp and relentless eye, asking not only what is, but why it is, and who benefits. Imagine the world as a great machine, each of us a gear turning inside it. Some of us spin freely, catching light. Others grind endlessly, worn smooth by effort. The machine keeps turning. But who built it this way? And why do so many find themselves trapped within it, exhausted, invisible, forgotten? Marx looked at that machine and dared to call it what it was. A system designed not for fairness, but for profit. A world where the few hold the levers, and the many are told to be grateful for the crumbs that fall. But this isn't just about economics. It's about dignity, about meaning, about whether a human being should be measured by what they can produce, or by something deeper, something that can't be bought or sold. Marxism aches with a kind of moral fury, a love that burns too hot to stay silent. It dreams not just of revolt, but of reunion, a world where labor is not a chain, but a song, where people work not to survive, but to create, to build, to share. A world where the child of a miner can read poetry by candlelight without fear of hunger tomorrow. It is, at its heart, a philosophy of longing, for justice, for equality, for the kind of community where no one is left behind, where power is not hoarded like gold, but held with care, like something sacred. But let's not romanticize it too easily. Marxism also carries the weight of history, of revolutions that rose and fell, of promises made in smoke, of regimes that traded one form of tyranny for another. The dream is beautiful, yes, but the path is perilous. Still, the question it asks remains, pressing and clear, even in the quiet of this moment. Who is the world really working for? In your own life, maybe you've felt it. The sense that your time, your energy, your worth is being measured by someone else's clock. That you are a cog in a process that doesn't see you. Not really. That your labor feeds a system that offers very little in return. Marx would not have blamed you for feeling tired. He would have said, yes, that exhaustion is not your fault. That weariness is the sound of injustice grinding slowly through your soul. And no matter how many self-help books or corporate wellness programs try to dress it up, alienation is real. It is the wound beneath the paycheck. But Marxism doesn't just offer critique. It offers hope, not the easy kind, not the kind that comes with slogans or campaigns, but the slow, steady hope of people waking up, not just individually, but together. Because for Marx, salvation isn't found in solitary enlightenment. It's found in solidarity, in standing beside one another, shoulder to shoulder, and saying, we deserve better, all of us. And in that standing, something happens. The gears begin to shift. The machine sputters. The story changes. You see, the heart of Marxism isn't destruction. It's transformation. Not the burning down, but the building up. A vision of a society where the baker and the teacher and the artist and the nurse all stand equal in dignity, where wealth is not a fortress but a river, flowing where it's needed, where work is not a sentence but a purpose, chosen freely and shared. And yes, that dream has been abused, twisted by power, broken by war, buried under bureaucracy. But the dream itself, when stripped of flags and iron and fear, still hums with something deeply human. It's the dream of the mother who wants her child to grow up without hunger, the worker who longs not for riches but for rest, the student who wants to learn without debt, the elder who wishes to grow old with dignity. These are not extravagant things. They are, in truth, the most basic of needs, and yet they remain out of reach for so many. So perhaps tonight, as the world quiets around you, you might ask, what would it look like for us to build a society that truly cares for all its people? Not just in word, but in action. What would change if the worth of a life was no longer tied to its productivity, but to its simple, radiant being? These questions don't have easy answers, but they matter. And in asking them, we begin to see the outline of something new, something more just, more tender, more whole. The night grows deeper now. And the machine for a moment seems to pause. In this stillness, you are not a gear, not a number, not a tool. You are human. You are part of the story. And maybe, just maybe, the story can change. Next, we will drift upward into the strange and shimmering world of idealism, where reality is not what it seems, and the mind weaves the very fabric of what is. Close your eyes for a moment. Let the world fall silent. The room you're in, the air around you, the ticking clock, the soft weight of your body resting against the earth, it all slips away. What remains? A strange, flickering canvas of thought, shapes, colors, memories, dreams. The quiet echo of a voice that is both yours and not entirely yours. A world behind your eyes, as vivid and undeniable as the one you left behind. Now open your eyes again and ask yourself, what if this world, the one you see and touch and move through, is not separate from that inner canvas, but born from it? What if reality itself begins, not in matter, but in mind? Idealism begins not with argument, but with wonder. With that quiet sense of mystery you feel when you realize that every tree, every face, every star in the night sky exists for you only as it appears in your consciousness. that even the firm ground beneath your feet is known only through sensation, shaped and filtered by a mind you did not choose, but which somehow holds the entire world. For the idealist, this isn't just poetic musing, it's the beginning of everything. The suggestion that reality, true reality, is not out there, cold and distant, but in here, immediate and alive. That what we call the world is not a solid object, but an unfolding experience, stitched together moment by perception, interpretation, meaning. It's a dizzying thought, isn't it? That the sky above you may not exist apart from the act of seeing it. That even time may be something woven from the threads of awareness. That the universe, vast as it may seem, might bloom like a flower inside the mind. But idealism doesn't deny the world. It cherishes it. It simply shifts its center. Instead of seeing consciousness as something passive, like a flashlight scanning an already built world, it suggests that consciousness is the architect, the stage, the actor, and the audience all at once. Plato, long ago, imagined a realm of perfect forms, pure ideas that cast shadows on the cave walls of our everyday world. He spoke of truth not as something we touch, but as something we remember, something our soul already knows. And perhaps you felt it too. That strange moment when you encounter something utterly new, and yet feels familiar, as though you've seen it before in a dream you forgot upon waking. Later, thinkers like Berkeley would go even further, whispering into the silence that to be is to be perceived. That nothing exists outside the gaze of a mind, whether human or divine. That the apple falls not because of gravity alone, but because some mind, yours, mine, or God's, is there to see it fall. And then came Hegel, weaving an even grander tapestry, where mind and history dance together in a spiraling rhythm, each thought birthing another, each step leading us closer to some deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. Of course, these are difficult ideas, slippery as water, easy to mock in daylight. The world feels solid after all. Pain feels real. Hunger is not a dream. And yet, even these things arrive to us as experiences, colored by thought, shaped by meaning, always personal. Idealism asks us to slow down, to listen more deeply, to see the world not as a fixed object to conquer, but as a mirror, endlessly reflecting our own inner life. It invites us to imagine that maybe, just maybe, we are not strangers in the universe, but creators of it. That reality is not some brutal machinery of atoms and laws, but a symphony, and our minds are the instruments that make the music possible. Late at night, when the house is quiet and your thoughts drift like mist, have you ever had the sense that the line between you and the world has faded? That your breath is part of the wind, your thoughts part of the stars? Idealism lives in those moments, in that soft, glowing space where separation vanishes and all things are one. It is not always a comforting vision, because if the world is shaped by mind, then every cruelty, every injustice, every sorrow must also be faced within. There is no one else to blame, no machine to curse, only ourselves, our choices, our blindness, our awakening. But in that realization, there is also great hope, because if the world is a dream, it is a dream we can change. If reality is shaped by mind, then compassion, beauty, and truth are not luxuries, they are building blocks. They are the very stuff of the universe. Idealism doesn't give you instructions. It doesn't demand you overthrow empires or rewrite laws. Instead, it asks something far more radical. Change the way you see. Look again. Peel back the layers. Notice the light in things. Notice how the world shifts when you do. A child laughing on a city street. The curl of steam rising from a cup of tea. The quiet ache of missing someone you love. These are not just passing sensations. They are worlds unto themselves, entire universes, blooming inside your awareness. Perhaps that is what idealism truly offers. The gentle suggestion that life is not something happening to you, but something blooming through you. That meaning is not found in things, but in the gaze that gives them life. That even in a world of sorrow and struggle, there is a secret radiance, soft, shimmering, always just behind the surface. And maybe, just maybe, when you fall asleep tonight and your dreams unfold in strange and wondrous colors, you'll remember, this too is reality. This too is the world. And you, dear listener, are not a visitor in it, but a creator, one thought at a time. So rest easy. Let the world dissolve into softness. You are not alone. You are the very fabric of the story, woven of dreams and light and quiet mystery. And tomorrow, when you wake, you will carry that mystery with you, hidden behind your eyes, shaping everything you see. Next, we'll descend gently into the firm, earthy realm of materialism, a world where only what can be touched and measured is real. Or is it? There's something oddly comforting about a world that doesn't need us to believe in it. A stone doesn't care if you understand it. The sea rolls on, regardless of your doubts. Your heart beats in your chest, not because you will it to, but because it must. And when the wind moves through the trees, it doesn't ask for permission. It simply moves. Materialism begins here, in the solidity of things, the unyielding weight of what is. It whispers that the world is not a dream, not a story or a projection or a cosmic play of consciousness, but a vast, indifferent unfolding of matter. Atoms spinning, cells dividing, stars burning, all without purpose or plan, just action and reaction governed by laws as old as time. And yet, in that indifference, there is a kind of beauty too. Imagine the Earth in its infancy, a swirling cloud of dust and fire, cooling into rock, rain falling for the first time on lifeless stone. No one was there to watch it, no mind to give it meaning. And still, it happened. It happened anyway. Galaxies formed, planets turned, volcanoes erupted. Life began not with a thought, but with a chemical spark in a shallow pool of ancient water. And you, sitting there now, listening in the dark, are made of that same stuff. Every cell in your body, every strand of hair, every breath you take, it's all made of matter that was once part of a star. You are not separate from the universe. You are its echo, its continuation, its unfolding. The carbon in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen in your lungs, it was forged in the heart of exploding suns, scattered across the void, drawn together by gravity and time, shaped slowly into the form you now call you. Materialism tells this story not to dim the magic, but to ground it. To say, look how far we've come, not on wings of spirit, but on the back of matter itself. Look how the dust of dead stars learned to speak, to love, to wonder. It can sound cold at first, even cruel. A world without ultimate purpose, without divine script, without cosmic justice. Where the universe doesn't know your name, and the stars burn not for you, but because that's what stars do. But perhaps the chill of that thought is what makes the warmth of life so precious. If nothing is guaranteed, then everything is a gift. Think of your heartbeat again, that quiet rhythm that never asks for your praise. Think of your hands, how they move through the world, grasping, feeling, building. Think of laughter, rising not from the soul, but from the firing of neurons and the flexing of muscles. And yet it feels real, doesn't it? It feels true. Materialism doesn't deny the feeling. It simply reminds us that even the most delicate emotions are tied to something physical. That sadness lives in the body, not just the mind. That love has a pulse. That memory leaves marks in the brain. That consciousness, this strange, flickering light we live inside, may emerge not from mystery, but from matter intricately arranged. And if that's true, if thought itself rises from the dance of atoms, isn't that its own kind of miracle? Sometimes people say materialism strips the world of wonder. But perhaps it just asks us to look for wonder in different places. Not in what lies beyond the stars, but in the stars themselves. Not in the idea of a soul floating above the body, but in the body itself, its elegance, its resilience, its quiet, stubborn will to live. There's something humbling in that, something grounding. When you lie down at night, when your body relaxes into the weight of the bed, you feel it, the truth of material things, the soft press of fabric against skin, the warmth that radiates from your chest, the heaviness of your limbs as sleep draws near. This is not illusion. This is real. This is matter. And somehow, in the midst of all that physicality, you exist. Fragile, flickering, conscious. Materialism doesn't pretend to have all the answers. It doesn't try to explain why beauty matters, or why music makes us cry, or why silence at 2 a.m. feels so different than silence at noon. But it reminds us that all of it is built on the same foundation. Atoms and energy, particles and probability, a quiet order humming underneath everything. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need the universe to speak our language. Maybe it's enough that it gave us the tools to speak at all, that out of dust and pressure and heat, it gave us mouths and thoughts and stories. And now, here we are, telling stories about the very stuff that made us. So if you ever feel lost, if the world feels too vast, too silent, too impersonal, remember this: you are made of the same matter as the world you fear. You are not a guest here. You belong. You are not separate from the world's indifference. You are its exception, its witness, its voice. And that voice, no matter how small, matters. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, think of your body not as something separate from the stars, but as their continuation. You are the cosmos, dreaming itself. You are matter, come alive. And in the soft rhythm of your breath, the universe listens to itself in silence. Next, we'll wander into the misty terrain of skepticism, where doubt is not the enemy of truth, but its most faithful companion. There's a peculiar silence that settles when all the noise of certainty fades away. A kind of quiet that doesn't demand answers or impose conclusions, but simply allows the question to remain open, like a window left ajar in the middle of the night. That is where skepticism lives, not in harsh denial, not in cold dismissal, but in the pause, in the delicate hesitation before belief, in the soft whisper of maybe not. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a fog-covered path. You can see a little way ahead, but beyond that, everything blurs into gray. You could run forward and claim you know what lies beyond. You could build signs and fences and tell others where the road leads. Or you could stop, breathe in the damp morning air and admit, I don't know, not yet. That pause, that humility in the face of uncertainty is the heart of skepticism. It's often misunderstood, this way of thinking. People hear skeptic and imagine someone rigid, cold, dismissive, someone who rejects belief, who scoffs at hope, who refuses wonder. But that isn't the kind of skepticism we're speaking of tonight. Not the harshness of doubt as a weapon, but the gentleness of doubt as a friend. A hand on your shoulder that says, "Are you sure?" before you leap. This kind of skepticism isn't about tearing things down. It's about slowing down. It's the child who keeps asking why, not to be difficult, but because they genuinely want to understand. It's the voice that says, let's look again, even when everyone else has moved on. It's the longing to know, not to be right, but to be honest. And honesty is a rare kind of courage. To admit that you don't know, that's not weakness, that's strength, especially in a world that rewards certainty, where confidence often passes for truth. Skepticism asks you to hold your beliefs with open hands, not clenched fists, to look at the stories we're told about the world, about ourselves, about meaning, and gently, lovingly ask, is this real, or is this just what I want to believe? Think of how often we build our lives on things we've never really questioned. Ideas passed down like heirlooms, assumptions dressed up as facts, certainties we inherit without a second glance. Skepticism doesn't destroy these. It simply shines a quiet light on them and asks if they still fit, if they still hold, if they still feel true when we whisper them in the dark. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes, under that light, the stories crack, the truths unravel, and that can be frightening. To let go of something you've leaned on for years, to feel the ground shift beneath your feet. But there's a strange beauty in that moment too, because what remains after the false things fall away is something quieter, something more honest, something more yours. Skepticism doesn't promise answers. It promises space, space to wonder, space to listen, space to feel the tension between belief and disbelief without rushing to one side. In that space, we begin to grow not just in knowledge, but in wisdom. Some of the oldest thinkers walked this path. They didn't claim to know the secrets of the universe. Instead, they claimed something even more radical, that they didn't know anything at all. And yet, in that not knowing, they found peace, a kind of freedom, a way of living that was less about clinging and more about observing, less about controlling and more about questioning. In a way, skepticism is a kind of spiritual patience. It says, I don't need all the answers tonight. I just need to keep asking the right questions. There's something soothing about that, especially in the quiet hours of the night. When the world outside slows down, when the noise softens, when the masks fall away. That's when the real questions come to visit. Not the loud ones with headlines and hashtags, but the soft ones, the trembling ones, the ones we carry deep inside. Who am I, really? What if I've been wrong? What do I actually know for sure? What if no one knows? And instead of rushing to fill those questions with answers, maybe we could simply sit with them, let them be, let them breathe. There's a deep kind of intimacy in doubt, a vulnerability. It opens us to each other. Because when I say I don't know and you say it too, suddenly we're not strangers anymore. We're companions in the dark, walking the same uncertain path. And in that shared not knowing, something tender grows, a kind of trust that doesn't depend on being right, but on being real. Skepticism isn't the end of belief, it's its beginning. Because the beliefs that survive honest doubt are stronger, deeper, more alive. They're not inherited, they're chosen. They're not hollow, they've been tested. They're not imposed, they've been earned. And when we do believe, truly gently, after the storm of questions has passed, those beliefs shine all the brighter. Not because they were easy, but because they were true enough to stay. So tonight, as you lie beneath the weight of stars you may never understand, allow yourself the gift of not knowing. Let your questions linger like mist above a sleeping lake. You don't need to chase them away. You don't need to solve them. Just notice them. Let them speak. Sometimes, the most honest answer is silence. And in that silence, you may find something you didn't expect. Not an answer, but a kind of calm. A soft, steady sense that it's okay not to know. That the world is no less beautiful for being uncertain. That mystery is not your enemy, but your oldest companion. Next, when the time is right, we'll explore the winding roads of utilitarianism, a philosophy that dares to measure goodness, even when the heart is trembling. But for now, rest. Let the night wrap its arms around you. Let the questions rest beside you like gentle ghosts. And sleep, not because all is certain, but because it doesn't have to be. Some nights, when the wind is slow and the world feels unusually quiet, the mind begins to weigh things it usually ignores. It picks up the day and examines it gently, like a stone found on the shore. What was good? What could have been better? Did I help more than I hurt? Did I add light or shadow? These quiet calculations, almost invisible, are the soul of something deeper, something that has long tried to answer a simple yet impossible question. What does it mean to do good? That question, deceptively soft, lies at the heart of a way of thinking called utilitarianism. You don't have to know the word to have lived it. Anyone who's ever stood between two choices and asked, which will help more people, has felt its quiet pull. Anyone who sacrificed a little of their own comfort so that someone else could feel joy has walked in its gentle shadow. Utilitarianism, at its core, is not a cold equation. It's the warm desire to make things better, to stretch goodness as far as it can go. But even the gentlest philosophy can carry a heavy burden. And tonight, as we drift through the soft currents of thought, let's not be afraid to touch that weight, to feel the delicate tension between helping the many and holding on to the few, between the math of morality and the ache of being human. Utilitarianism begins with a question that sounds so simple you could whisper it in the dark. What brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number? Imagine a scale, perfectly balanced. On one side, suffering. On the other, joy. Life becomes a series of choices that tip the scale this way or that. And our task, this philosophy suggests, is to keep nudging the world toward joy, toward light, toward less pain for as many people as possible. There's something beautiful in that, isn't there? The idea that our actions matter not just to us, but to the invisible web of people all around us. That every kindness sends ripples. That we are not alone, not separate. That we are part of a grander equation, where love, even in small doses, shifts the balance of the world. But it's never easy. Because life isn't a clean equation. It's messy. It's full of gray. And sometimes the act of choosing what brings the most happiness requires a kind of coldness we don't want to admit. It means sacrificing the few for the many. It means saying no when your heart wants to say yes. It means living with the knowledge that someone's pain was weighed, considered, and deemed necessary. That's a hard truth to hold. Imagine being told that someone you love can't be saved because saving 5 others is better. Imagine knowing your sorrow was a price paid for someone else's smile. Utilitarianism doesn't shy away from these hard calculations. It stares them down and says, this is the cost of caring for the whole. And yet, beneath that rational clarity is something tender, a longing, a hope, a belief that we can, through thought and care and sacrifice, build a world with less pain. A world where joy is not hoarded, but shared. Where the good of many is not an abstract idea, but a lived reality. That belief is not cold. It is heartbreakingly warm. It is the reason why doctors make impossible choices, why parents give up dreams for their children, why strangers run into danger to save others. Utilitarianism doesn't exist only in the minds of philosophers. It lives in hospitals and classrooms and kitchens. It lives in quiet acts of service, in hard goodbyes, in the trembling decision to do what is right even when it hurts. And sometimes, when no choice feels clean, when both paths hold sorrow, it offers a compass. Choose the one where less pain lingers. But what of the soul? What of love? Of beauty? Of dreams that don't make sense on a scale? That's where utilitarianism stumbles gently. It cannot always account for the poetry of the heart. It cannot always measure what makes life shimmer. A song that saves a lonely heart. A moment of silence between two people who understand each other. A decision that costs everything but feels right. These cannot be counted. They escape the scale. And yet, the spirit of utilitarianism doesn't need to measure everything. It only asks that we don't forget others in the pursuit of ourselves, that we keep the world in our minds when we make choices, that we ask, again and again, who will be affected by this? Will it bring more love into the world or more sorrow? It asks for awareness, and perhaps that's its greatest gift. Not a perfect answer, but a way of thinking that draws us out of ourselves, that reminds us we are connected, that pain is not isolated, and neither is joy. As you lie there beneath the hush of the stars, you may feel the weight of your own small choices. The things you said, the moments you turned away, the times you offered a smile, they matter. Not because they change everything, but because they tilt the scale, however slightly, toward light. That's all utilitarianism ever really asks. Tilt the scale, even if it's just a little, even if it's just in the life of one person, even if that person is you. Tomorrow, or the day after, we'll turn toward another philosophy, one that walks in logic and reason, in clear skies and sharp minds. Rationalism. But tonight, as the quiet deepens, let this thought cradle you to sleep. The world is not balanced yet, but your kindness is part of the weight that makes it so. And in a universe that doesn't always make sense, that might be enough. It's late now. The night has deepened. Outside your window, the world lies still, wrapped in a soft hush. There's something sacred about this hour, when most of the world is asleep and only the gentle hum of your thoughts remains. This is a time when the mind becomes a lantern in the dark, glowing quietly, not loud or demanding, but persistent, searching. Have you ever sat in silence and followed a thought all the way to the end? Letting it unfold, step by step, as if you were walking down a hallway lit only by reason? That calm, deliberate process, that trust in the mind to guide you forward, is the spirit of something ancient and enduring, something called rationalism. At first, the word might sound a little distant, cold even, as if it belongs in the dusty corners of philosophy books or in the mouths of scholars arguing over logic. But in truth, rationalism lives much closer than that. It lives in the quiet certainty that truth exists, not just in what we see or touch or hear, but in what we can understand, in what we can know without needing to be shown. It begins with a simple, almost childlike belief that the mind, if used carefully, can unlock the secrets of the universe. There's something comforting in that, isn't there? In a world full of confusion, of shifting emotions and unpredictable events, rationalism offers a gentle hand. It says, slow down, think clearly. Truth is not lost. It's just waiting to be found. Somewhere beneath the noise and the chaos, there is order. There are patterns. There are reasons. And we with our fragile, flickering consciousness, can discover them. Imagine for a moment the great thinkers of the past, alone in quiet rooms lit by candlelight, staring at the blank pages before them. They weren't relying on experiments or measurements. They were relying on thought. Pure, reasoned thought. The kind that rises from within when you start with one idea and let it bloom into another and another until something new and clear emerges. Descartes once sat with his doubts so deeply that he questioned everything, even the existence of the world around him. Until at last, one small, shining truth rose through the fog. I think, therefore I am. That was enough. That was the anchor. From there, he built outward, trusting that the mind, if honest and precise, could build a world that made sense. That is the heart of rationalism, trust in reason. And while that may sound like a quiet thing, it's also incredibly brave, Because to trust reason is to say that even in the darkest confusion, there is a path forward. It might take time, it might take patience, but truth is not unreachable. It is simply waiting to be unveiled, one step at a time. This way of thinking doesn't dismiss emotion. It simply doesn't depend on it. Rationalism is like a lighthouse in a storm. Emotions may rise and fall like crashing waves, anger, joy, fear, love, but reason stands tall, unshaken. It asks not how we feel about something, but whether it is true, whether it holds up under scrutiny, whether it can be known. And that can be a great comfort in moments of uncertainty. When your heart is overwhelmed, when your senses deceive you, when the world feels too loud to bear, reason can be a soft whisper that guides you back. It reminds you that not everything is chaos, that some things can be known, that some questions have answers, not because someone told us, but because the logic leads us there. But rationalism also carries a quiet tension, because the mind, as luminous as it is, can become a cage as well as a lantern. We can think ourselves into corners. We can become so in love with certainty, with clarity, that we forget the mysteries that surround us. That not everything can be reasoned through. That not all truth is neat. The universe, after all, is not a tidy machine. It is vast, strange, poetic. And there are things, beauty, love, awe, that cannot always be reduced to logic. They don't obey the rules of deduction. They bloom suddenly, unexpectedly, like a flower growing through stone. Still, rationalism doesn't deny these things. It only asks us to question what we can, to think carefully, to never stop seeking the deeper layer beneath what we see. It encourages us not to settle for surface answers, to keep digging, to trust that the mind, even with its limits, is one of the most powerful tools we've ever been given. You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet thrill when a thought clicks into place, when something confusing suddenly becomes clear, when a problem unravels not because someone told you how, but because you found your own way through it. That is rationalism, too. Not cold, not distant, just deeply human. And it's not only for philosophers. It lives in every question we ask that begins with why, and every answer we craft with care. It lives in the long conversations under the stars, when we wonder about the nature of time or consciousness or meaning. It lives in our refusal to accept something just because we were told, in our desire to know for ourselves. In the end, rationalism is not a rejection of the world. It's a love letter to understanding. It's the belief that the universe, however mysterious, can speak to us in a language we can learn, and that language is thought. So tonight, as your thoughts slow and the hush of sleep begins to settle around you, hold close this gentle truth. Your mind, quiet and glowing in the dark, is not alone. It is part of a great lineage of seekers, dreamers, thinkers, those who dared to believe that the light within is enough to illuminate the world outside. And even if all you do is ask one honest question, that is enough to begin. Let that thought carry you into rest. Let reason be a comfort, not a burden. A warm fire in the night, burning softly, reminding you that there is sense, there is structure, there is meaning, and you are capable of finding it. Sleep well, gentle thinker. The truth will still be here when you wake. Let me tell you something quietly, something not everyone likes to hear. There is no final word, no perfect meaning, no absolute center to the story of the world. Only layers and cracks and echoes that fold in on themselves like the pages of a book written in a language no one ever finishes learning. This is the mood of post-structuralism. Not a philosophy exactly, but a feeling, a way of breathing through the chaos, a slow recognition, whispered late at night, that the meanings we once clung to, truth, identity, knowledge, may not be as solid as we were taught to believe. Imagine language like a mirror. We think it reflects reality, that words point to fixed things, tree, truth, love, me. But what if that mirror isn't whole? What if it's already cracked from the moment we first looked into it? That's what post-structuralism gently suggests, that every meaning is stitched from other meanings, tangled in a web of difference, deferral, and repetition. That words don't simply point, they dance, they shift, they multiply. That behind every sentence lies not a stable truth, but another doorway. And behind that, another. It's not comfortable. Post-structuralism isn't meant to be. It doesn't offer a tidy answer. It opens a window into uncertainty and invites you to sit there a while. You might be wondering why anyone would choose that. Why lean into ambiguity, into the unraveling of structure, when we so badly crave clarity? But that's just it. Sometimes in trying to make everything neat, we overlook what's alive. We box it in. And post-structuralism, it peels off the label. It listens for the pulse underneath the form. You see, we live in stories. We build ourselves out of narratives. But what if those stories aren't fixed? What if the structure we've built our identities upon, nation, gender, morality, meaning, is not a foundation but scaffolding, shifting with every glance, every breath, every word spoken or left unsaid? For post-structuralists, this isn't a tragedy. It's an invitation, not to despair, but to dance. To see identity not as a prison, but as a performance. Language not as a cage, but a labyrinth. Meaning not as a destination, but a trail of shimmering footsteps on wet stone, always fading, always forming. In the silence of this hour, you can almost hear it, the rustling of thought unraveling, the realization that we are not just readers of the world, we are also being read by it, interpreted, misinterpreted, rewritten in every glance, every gesture, every phrase. Jacques Derrida, a voice often associated with post-structuralism, once said, "There is nothing outside the text." And though that line has been twisted in many directions, perhaps what he meant was this, that we cannot escape the web of meaning. We are born into it. We breathe through it. Everything we touch is already touched by language, by signs, by difference. But here's the quiet beauty. If nothing is fixed, then nothing is final. If meanings are unstable, then so too is power, and so too is control. Every voice can disrupt. Every whisper can reshape the whole. And that is hope. Post-structuralism, though painted as obscure or cynical, is really a kind of radical empathy. It tells us, don't assume. Don't close the book too soon. The person in front of you is not just one story. They are a library, full of contradictions, edits, and footnotes. You too are unfinished. You too are a revision in progress. So what does that mean for us here at the edge of sleep? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe it's simply a reminder that it's okay not to have the answers. That not every question has a single truth waiting at its center. That sometimes the act of asking is the most honest thing we can do. Let your thoughts drift now, gently. Let them loosen their structure, like ink running in the rain. You don't have to hold it all together. You don't have to make sense of every word, every thought, every version of yourself that you've tried to contain. Tonight, you are allowed to be unstructured. You are allowed to be uncertain. You are allowed to rest inside the poetry of what doesn't quite fit. Because meaning is still here, even when it slips from your grasp, even when it folds in on itself, even when it whispers in a voice that seems to contradict the one before. It is here, in the tension, in the play, in the shimmer. So close your eyes, dear listener. Let the structures fall away. Let the pages drift. Let the mirror crack. And in the pieces, you may just find something more beautiful than certainty. A kind of truth that breathes. A kind of self that moves. A kind of rest that only comes when you stop trying to hold it all in place. Sleep well in the lovely, unsteady dark. Let's close our eyes for a moment, not to escape the world, but to feel it more deeply. Can you sense it? The quiet presence of your body, resting? The gentle weight of the blanket against your skin? The way your breath moves through your chest like a tide that never truly leaves or returns? There's a kind of stillness here, soft, immediate, delicate. That's where phenomenology begins. Not in theories or systems or heavy books with too many footnotes, but here, in the way life feels from the inside. You see, phenomenology doesn't ask you to analyze the world from a distance. It doesn't demand you prove it exists or take it apart like a puzzle with missing pieces. It simply invites you to return, to presence, to perception, to experience itself. It begins with a simple, almost childlike question. What is it like to be? Not in the abstract, but here and now. What is it like to see the color blue, to hear the hum of a refrigerator at night when all else is still? What is it like to feel sadness settle behind your ribs, or joy curl gently in your throat before it spills out as laughter? Phenomenology teaches us to look again, not at objects, but at how they appear to us, at how our world is given, not just seen. It suggests that everything we know about life begins with our lived experience, not with theories imposed on top of it, but with the raw texture of being alive. Think of it like this. Most of the time, we rush through life. We pass through rooms without noticing the light. We speak without hearing our own voice. We eat without tasting, walk without feeling the ground beneath our feet. But phenomenology slows us down. It whispers, "Wait, look again." Let me tell you a secret. There's no such thing as a neutral observer. You are always in the world, not outside it, but inside it. The way you see is part of what's seen. The way you feel colors everything around you. When the wind brushes your cheek, it's not just a physical event. It's a moment, a sensation, a meaning that emerges between you and the world. And that is what phenomenologists care about. Not the wind as data, but the wind as lived. Husserl, who helped shape this way of thinking, once said, we must return to the things themselves, not to the labels we've placed on them, not to the scientific categories or logical formulas, but to the raw experience, the texture, the immediacy, the shimmering now. It's not about denying science or reason. It's about remembering that before we ever dissect the world, we live in it. We breathe it in. We feel it pressing against our skin, echoing in our hearts. Phenomenology wants to dwell in that space, between thought and thing, between you and the world that meets you with every breath. And the beautiful thing is, no one else can feel the world exactly the way you do. Your experience is yours alone, singular, intimate, unrepeatable. That doesn't make it less real. It makes it deeply, profoundly human. When you remember a childhood home, for example, you don't just recall walls and furniture. You remember the smell of the hallway, the rhythm of footsteps on wooden stairs, the sound of rain on the roof during a thunderstorm. These aren't just details, they are your experience. And through them, the world becomes meaningful. Phenomenology holds space for that. It doesn't rush to explain away. It lingers. It listens. Tonight, as you drift slowly towards sleep, try noticing the small things, the way the air feels against your lips, the pause between your thoughts, the quiet hum behind silence. This isn't abstraction, it's intimacy. It's the quiet truth that your life unfolds not as an idea, but as a series of moments lived from within. Even time, phenomenology reminds us, is not a clock ticking on the wall. It's how you feel a second stretch when you're afraid, or how hours vanish when you're with someone you love. Time isn't outside you, it breathes with you. And your body isn't just a thing. It's not just a vessel that carries you, it is you. It is the place from which the world becomes real. When you feel warmth, you don't observe it from afar, you are the warmth. When your heart aches, it's not an event happening to you, it is you, being in that moment. Phenomenology is tender in this way. It doesn't separate mind from body, self from world, subject from object. Instead, it reveals how entangled we are in everything we touch and taste and feel. It tells us, you are not alone in a cold, indifferent universe. You are a being who experiences. And in that experiencing, the world is revealed, not once, but again and again, in endless variation through the lens of your own awareness. There's something quietly healing in that. You don't have to force meaning onto your life. You don't have to fit it into categories. You can just be. You can sit with what appears, let it unfold, let it shimmer for what it is. You're not a machine. You're not a problem to be solved. You're a perceiving soul in a living world. You are feeling. You are presence. You are softness, reaching out into the dark. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, let that thought stay with you. That the world is not something you must conquer or define. It is something you are always already inside of. Let yourself feel it, not think it. Let yourself rest in the way the night folds around your shoulders, the way this moment holds you without asking anything in return. The world is here, you are here, and in this quiet meeting, everything matters. Sleep well, my friend. You are not far from the truth. It's right there, in the way you breathe, in the way this moment feels. Let's settle into the silence again, the kind that deepens when the day is over, when the thoughts stop rushing and begin to drift, like small boats across a still lake. You're here now, not to run or chase anything, but to sit quietly beside an old and careful tradition, a way of thinking that believes meaning can be found not in mystery, but in clarity. Analytic philosophy, you see, doesn't always come with dramatic gestures. It doesn't burst into the room with grand claims or poetic longing. No, it enters quietly, like a scholar with spectacles and a cup of tea, asking gently, but what do we really mean by that? There's something soothing in that question, isn't there? In the idea that confusion isn't a wall, but a fog we can gently part with the right words. Analytic thinkers, those strange, meticulous minds, believe that many of our troubles, especially the philosophical ones, don't come from the world being broken, but from language being tangled. From using words like truth, mind, good, or freedom without stopping to ask, what exactly are we saying? What do these words really mean? And so they begin, slowly, carefully, like someone untangling a delicate chain in the dark. There's a quiet kind of love here. Love for language, love for precision, love for the idea that maybe, just maybe, if we look closely enough, if we take our time, we can understand each other more clearly. That meaning isn't something hidden behind life, but something woven into the words we use to describe it. Imagine two people arguing late at night, their voices rising, hearts racing. But what if, underneath it all, they're simply using the same word in different ways? One says freedom, meaning the right to choose. The other meaning the absence of limits. They argue and ache and drift apart, not because they truly disagree, but because they never paused to define what they meant. Analytic philosophy whispers into that moment and says, slow down. Let's unpack this together. There's a beauty in that kind of patience. It might not always be emotional or dramatic, but it is human, deeply human. Because so much of life, our joys, our pain, our questions, are held in language. And if language is unclear, then so is the life we try to explain through it. You might think of analytic philosophy as a kind of quiet lantern. It doesn't illuminate everything at once. It doesn't solve the mystery of existence in one grand sweep, but it lights the next step. It clarifies one sentence, one idea, one assumption we didn't know we were carrying. In this way, it can be tender, even as it is rigorous. It trusts that understanding doesn't need to be rushed, that we don't need to chase after meaning in a frenzy. We can sit with it, ask questions, clarify, define, think. Wittgenstein, one of the most enigmatic minds of this tradition, once said that the purpose of philosophy is to show the fly the way out of the fly bottle. It sounds strange at first, doesn't it? But he meant this, that sometimes we get trapped in loops of thought, like a fly banging against invisible glass. And we don't need someone to solve the whole puzzle of life. We just need someone to point out the trap, to show us that the confusion we feel might not be about the world at all, but about how we're trying to talk about it. There's a certain peace that comes from that realization. We don't always need to have the final answers. Sometimes it's enough to ask better questions, to peel back a word and see what's beneath it. To notice that when someone says, "What is consciousness?" they might be lumping together feelings, awareness, memory, intention, all under one label. And maybe that's why the answer seems so distant. Because the question was never clear to begin with. Analytic philosophy can be a little like cleaning your glasses. The world doesn't change, but suddenly you see it more clearly, more sharply. You notice details that were blurred before. The world becomes more articulate, more precise. It's a quiet kind of courage, to face uncertainty not with dramatic declarations, but with careful definitions. To believe that truth might live not in how loud you speak, but in how clearly. Tonight, in this calm and flickering space, you might find comfort in that clarity. That maybe the tangled thoughts you carry aren't so tangled after all. That perhaps the confusion in your heart isn't a sign of failure, but just a moment waiting for language to catch up. Analytic philosophers often lived modest lives, scribbling thoughts in notebooks, puzzling over grammar, crafting sentences with the delicacy of a poet and the discipline of a mathematician. They believed that the world could be understood, bit by bit, like a careful translation from silence into speech. So here, with the night curled gently around you, let's honor that quiet work. Let's breathe with it, because even in a world full of noise and spectacle, there is a kind of grace in sitting down with a single sentence and asking, what do we really mean when we say this? Not to argue, not to dominate, but to understand, to make things clearer, to bring light to the places where words and meaning have drifted apart. You don't need to be a philosopher to do this. You only need to care about what you're saying and about what someone else hears when you say it. That's the heart of it, really. Analytic philosophy isn't just about logic puzzles or thought experiments. It's about connection, about making our ideas clearer so our lives can be too. So that when you say, "I love you," or "I'm afraid," or "I don't know what to believe anymore," You're not just making sounds in the dark. You're reaching out with words that mean something. And that is a kind of light. So rest now, in the hush of midnight. Let your thoughts wander like quiet streams through clear water. Let your mind tidy itself, like a desk being gently cleared. Let the words soften, settle. They'll be there in the morning, ready to help you understand the world just a little more clearly. You are not lost in confusion. You are simply learning to see through it. Sleep well. Tonight, let's talk about something that often arrives in the world like a storm, loud, wild, misunderstood. But here, in the softness of this hour, let's bring it closer. Let's sit beside it, not as rebels or ideologues, but as people who've felt at some point that the world could be gentler, if only we stopped ordering each other around. Anarchism. The word might stir something fierce in you. It's often painted with fire and fury, protests, broken windows, slogans screamed into the void. But beneath all that, if you listen closely, anarchism carries a strange tenderness, a longing not to destroy, but to unshackle. A belief, not in chaos, but in the dignity of a human life lived without domination. What if people didn't need rulers to tell them how to live? What if communities could shape themselves, slowly, messily, but honestly, through trust, not fear? That's the question anarchism whispers in the night, and not in anger, necessarily, but in sorrow. In the quiet ache that comes from watching a world where power often crushes rather than protects. It's easy to forget how much we've come to accept. Hierarchies that feel natural only because we were born into them. Bosses, governments, police, prisons, structures that organize life like a machine, ticking forward, demanding obedience. Anarchism doesn't just shout against these things. It wonders, why must it be like this? Not in a spirit of destruction, but in a spirit of reimagining. Of course, not all anarchists agree. Some believe in complete freedom from all systems. Others dream of small, decentralized collectives built on mutual care. Some have been peaceful gardeners of thought, others fierce flames of resistance. But they all share a refusal to believe that authority is sacred. They all ask whether order must come at the cost of freedom. There's a story often told, sometimes real, sometimes myth, of people who, when left alone without rulers, begin to help each other. Villages rebuilding after storms, strangers forming kitchens after disasters, people organizing food, safety, songs, with no badge telling them they must. Just the will to do right by each other. Anarchism sees that story and asks, why can't life always be like that? Maybe you felt it too. That deep discomfort when someone speaks down to you, not because they're wiser, but because they have a title. That small rebellion inside you when you're told, because I said so. Anarchism grows in those moments, like a wildflower in a crack of concrete. It's not about having no rules, but about questioning where those rules come from, and whether they serve us or simply control us. Sometimes this questioning turns loud, yes, because those with power rarely let it go willingly. But not all anarchists carry torches. Some simply carry questions and dreams. Emma Goldman, one of the most tender anarchist voices, once wrote of a society built not on obedience, but on love, where every soul is free to shape its own life. She didn't imagine utopia through violence, but through trust, through the belief that we, fragile and flawed as we are, might still be capable of living without being ruled. It's a fragile dream, isn't it? Especially in a world that teaches us to distrust each other. That tells us without punishment, there will be chaos. Without rulers, there will be blood. But anarchism believes otherwise. It believes that the violence is already here, in the quiet despair of lives controlled by systems they never chose, in the way children are taught to obey before they are taught to think, in the way entire cities can feel like cages. Anarchism isn't naive. It doesn't expect perfection. It simply hopes for something more human than command and control. A society shaped not like a pyramid, but like a circle. Some nights, when the world feels too heavy, when headlines scream of corruption, when laws feel more like chains than protections, it's easy to imagine the anarchist dream taking root again. Not through revolutions in the street, but through quiet refusals. Someone saying no to a cruel order. Someone feeding a stranger without waiting for permission. Someone choosing community over control. And maybe that's where it lives now. Not just in manifestos or protests, but in the everyday acts of reclaiming our freedom. in teachers who let students question, in neighbors who share food without keeping score, in artists who paint not for markets but for meaning. It's true, of course, that anarchism is difficult. Freedom always is. It asks us to be responsible in a way that obedience never does. It says, you are not a servant, but also no one else is yours to command. You must live with others, not above them. That's a hard promise to keep, but still, it dreams. And here, in this quiet space we've built together, far from the noise and fire of politics, I think we can feel its gentler side. A longing for dignity, a hope for autonomy, a wish for a world where no one must kneel just to survive. Anarchism is not a scream tonight. It is a murmur, a lullaby from those who believe we are capable of something softer, something freer than what we've been given. It doesn't ask you to overthrow anything tonight. It only asks you to wonder. What would it feel like to live without fear of authority? What would it mean if no one had to beg for housing, for bread, for safety? What if power wasn't concentrated, but shared? And what if the world, messy as it is, could be remade, not through control, but through care? Let those questions drift through you like smoke or song. No need to answer. Just let them settle in the spaces between your thoughts. Let them float beside your breath. Tomorrow, the systems may still stand. But tonight, in this hush, you are free to imagine, to listen to the quiet heartbeat of a dream that refuses to die. A world without masters, a life without chains. Sleep now, quietly, with the door open to that dream. Come closer now. Let's sit by this quiet fire of thought a little longer. Tonight, we walk with a philosophy that doesn't shout or dazzle. It simply asks us to look, to listen, to touch the world as it truly is. No lofty castles in the clouds, just the earth beneath our feet, the wind against our skin, the steady beat of a heart when a truth settles in. This is empiricism. There is something humble about it, don't you think? It doesn't claim to hold the key to all mysteries. It doesn't try to soar too high too fast. Instead, it begins right here, right where we are, with the soft rustle of leaves, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the glow of lamplight on your skin. Empiricism is born in sensation, in experience. It is the quiet belief that knowledge begins when we open our eyes, not when we close them. It's easy to forget, especially late at night, how much of what we believe comes not from grand visions, but from the smallest, most immediate things. The sound of someone's voice, the way the sky changes before rain, the feel of a surface, cool or warm, smooth or rough. These are the whispers that build our understanding of the world. Not doctrine, not divine revelation, but presence. Empiricism says to know something, we must meet it, not imagine it, not assume it, but encounter it through the body, through the senses, through the pulse of lived experience. And in this way, it feels deeply human. It honors the way we grow from children into people, by tasting, hearing, falling, getting back up. Not by reading truths in the stars, but by bumping into the world and learning how it responds. There's a quiet romance in this, I think, a kind of reverence for the world not as we wish it were, but as it reveals itself to us, bit by bit. Empiricism doesn't need perfect certainty. It allows for wonder, for doubt, for slowly changing our minds when the evidence asks us to. It is not rigid. It's soft, curious, patient. Think of a scientist, not in a lab coat under fluorescent lights, but as a child in the rain, catching droplets on their tongue, wondering why the sky cries. Think of a philosopher, not in a tower, but walking barefoot across a field, noticing how the ground feels different after a storm. Empiricism invites us to be that person again, to start with what we can sense and build from there. Not a fortress, but a shelter of truth. There are those, of course, who feel this is too simple, that the world holds mysteries the senses can never reach. And maybe that's true. Maybe there are truths that hide behind veils we'll never lift, but empiricism doesn't close the door on mystery. It simply chooses not to worship it. It waits. It watches. And if something leaves no trace, no touch, no ripple in the stream of experience, it lets it drift away like a dream in morning light. Some nights, especially nights like this, when the world feels uncertain, it's comforting to return to the body, to what we know not by theory, but by feel. The way your breath deepens when you're calm, the way music moves you without asking permission, the way pain or pleasure or memory arrives through your senses before you can explain it. Empiricism trusts that. It honors that. And in this way, it is also a philosophy of honesty. It says, don't pretend to know what you haven't lived. Don't cling to beliefs that the world keeps contradicting. Let your knowledge evolve, just as you do. Let it be guided by what unfolds before your eyes, not what someone once carved in stone. There's a kind of moral humility in that, too. A willingness to be wrong, to be surprised, to be changed by what is real. Of course, empiricism has its limits. It struggles with things that cannot be touched or tested. The ache of grief, the shimmer of love, the shimmer of beauty in a dream you can't explain. But perhaps that's part of the truth it offers, too. That not everything can be captured in data or measured in light. That some things are real not because we can prove them, but because we return to them again and again, like a shoreline to the tide. Still, even in the face of those mysteries, empiricism does not retreat. It does not abandon the senses. It leans in, it watches more closely, it listens a little longer. Because sometimes, even the most subtle truths reveal themselves not to the eye that demands, but to the eye that waits. So tonight, as you rest, let this philosophy hold you gently. Let it remind you that knowledge need not be a violent conquest. It can be a slow unfolding, a gathering of clues, a soft trust in the way the world touches us and the way we learn to touch it back. Empiricism doesn't ask for faith. It doesn't ask for blind acceptance, only attention, only presence. Only that you be here, fully in your senses, that you notice the way your chest rises with breath, that you feel the air brushing past your skin, that you hear these words and let them move through you, not as commands or conclusions, but as another thread in the fabric of your experience. Maybe in the end, that's all empiricism ever wanted, for us to remember that the world is not something to be solved, but something to be met, moment by moment, with open hands, with curious eyes, with the quiet belief that if we just stay present, the truth, however fragile, however fleeting, will show itself. And now, dear listener, let your body rest. Let the weight of your senses grow lighter. You've listened, you've felt, you've walked through the gentle garden of a philosophy that trusts the world to speak for itself. Let that trust cradle you now. The world, in all its mystery, is still here, still real, still waiting to be known, not through force, but through touch. Sleep softly. The truth can wait until morning. Come closer, just a little more. Let the quiet settle in. Let the noise of the world drift far away and listen with your heart, not just your mind. Tonight, we wander through a dream that has stirred in human hearts for generations. A dream of togetherness, of fairness, of shared bread and shared burdens. This is socialism. Not as a slogan or a battle cry, but as a gentle longing for a better way to be with one another. It begins with a simple, aching question. Why do some sleep on cold pavement while others build palaces of light? Why does one child wake to hunger while another wakes to silk and plenty? There's something in us that recoils at this. Something ancient and tender that believes, perhaps stubbornly, that life shouldn't be so lopsided. That maybe we were meant to rise together. Socialism in its softest voice whispers of this belief, that the wealth of the world, the fruits of our labor, the gifts of land and sky and sea, none of it should belong to just a few. That maybe, just maybe, we can learn to share not because we are forced to, but because it is right, because it is beautiful. This philosophy doesn't ask us to be saints. It doesn't demand purity or perfection. It only asks us to look around and to notice the worn hands that built the city, the tired backs that carry our comforts, the invisible workers whose names we do not know but whose efforts cradle our lives each day. Socialism reminds us that behind every gleaming tower and every full shelf, there are people with hopes, aches, laughter, and families. People who deserve dignity. You see, socialism is not about erasing differences. It's not about making everyone the same. It's about ensuring that those differences don't become chasms. That no one's worth is measured by what they own or how loudly they can buy silence. It's a philosophy that insists that human beings come first, before profits, before markets, before endless competition that turns neighbor into rival. It's easy to think of socialism as an old idea, weighed down by dusty slogans and political strife. But if you look closer, if you strip away the noise, you find something much more intimate. You find the grandmother who gives half her meal to the child next door, The nurse who stays late without pay because someone needed comfort. The friend who opens their home to someone with nowhere to go. These are small acts, almost invisible. But together, they sketch the heart of what socialism could be, not a system, but a spirit. In the stillness of night, when the streets quiet and the masks fall away, don't we all crave the same things? Warmth, safety, a place to belong, a life that matters. Socialism leans into this craving, not as weakness, but as wisdom. It trusts that the desire for care and connection is not something to outgrow, but something to grow into. Of course, the world is messy. Dreams are hard to hold, and socialism, like every philosophy, has been twisted by hands that used its name without carrying its heart. There have been regimes and rulers who claimed its banner while betraying its soul. But that is not the fault of the dream. It is the tragedy of those who forgot that socialism must be grounded in love, or it becomes just another machine. And yet, even with its scars, the dream persists. You see it in movements where teachers strike not just for pay, but for books in children's hands. You hear it in chants rising from crowded streets, calling not for revenge, but for fairness. You feel it in communities that plant gardens in abandoned lots, that cook meals for strangers, that refuse to let anyone fall too far without a hand reaching back. At its most tender, socialism doesn't tell us what to destroy. It reminds us what to build. A society where no one is disposable, where success is not measured by how much you take, but by how much you give, where we are not locked in endless competition, but woven into quiet cooperation. Imagine, if you will, a world where housing is not a prize, but a right, where healthcare is not a luxury, but a given, where education opens doors for every child, not just the lucky few. Imagine an economy that listens not only to shareholders, but to caretakers and cleaners, to farmers and factory workers. Imagine a world where the measure of progress is not in rising stock prices, but in rising well-being. This is not a utopia. It is not a fantasy. It is a direction, a North Star, a question we ask ourselves again and again. What would it look like if we really cared for each other? And perhaps that is the soul of socialism, not the rules, not the plans, but the care. The unyielding belief that people matter more than profit, that justice is not just a word, but a structure we build together, that no one should stand alone in the cold while another drowns in excess. As you lie back now, eyes heavy, let your heart rest in that vision. Let it soothe you, not because it is perfect, but because it is hopeful. Socialism doesn't promise paradise. It only invites us to try, to make choices each day that bring us a little closer to fairness, a little closer to compassion, a little closer to one another. And if that sounds naive, perhaps we need a little naivety, a little courage to believe that kindness can be more than personal, it can be political, that systems can reflect the softness of the human heart, not just its sharp edges. Tonight, let the idea of shared joy rock you gently to sleep. Let the thought of a world less divided, less cruel, hum beneath your dreams. And remember, even in a world that often forgets how to care, the seed of socialism lives on, in every hand that lifts another, in every voice that says, "You deserve better," and means it. Sleep well, dreamer. The world you dream of may not be here yet, but with each act of kindness, it draws closer. And when the morning comes, you'll rise not alone, but as part of something larger. A quiet, stubborn, beautiful hope that says, we can do this together. Always together. Come a little closer. The world outside is still turning, but in here, in this quiet hour between wakefulness and sleep, we can take a breath, a gentle breath. And tonight, I want to tell you about something simple, something that doesn't shout or preach, something that begins not in a temple or a theory, but in the soft, steady beat of the human heart. Humanism, not a doctrine carved in stone, not a flag waving in the wind, just a way of seeing, a way of believing, not in gods or heavens, but in us, in our ability to think, to feel, to care, in the flicker of kindness behind a stranger's eyes, in the courage it takes to be decent in an indifferent world. You see, humanism doesn't hand you a list of commandments. It doesn't promise eternal reward or threaten damnation. It does something far more tender. It trusts you. It looks at this fragile, confused, magnificent species of ours and says, you're enough. You can figure it out. You can make beauty, build meaning, create compassion, without waiting for someone else to tell you how. It's the quiet faith that within us, within our flawed and aching selves, there's something worth leaning into, that we're not merely lost children in the dark, but beings capable of light, capable of shaping a life that matters, a world that heals. Humanism doesn't deny the suffering. It sees it clearly. The wars, the cruelty, the loneliness, the endless ways we fail each other. But it doesn't collapse under that weight. It simply says, still, we go on. Still we try, again and again, to be good. Still we reach out when someone is falling. Still we listen, even when we're tired. Still we love, even knowing how fragile love is. At its core, humanism is a hand gently placed on your shoulder, reminding you that you don't have to be perfect. You only have to care, to try, to remember that the person beside you, no matter how different, feels the same hunger for meaning, the same fear of loss, the same need to be seen. It's there in the nurse who wipes a patient's brow long after her shift has ended. It's in the teacher who stays after class to listen to a student no one else notices. It's in the friend who sits beside you in silence when there are no words left. These quiet acts, these small lights, they're humanism in motion. Some say it's too soft, too trusting, that we need stricter rules, firmer hands, but maybe softness is its strength. Maybe in a world full of noise and hardness, humanism dares to be gentle, to believe that kindness is not weakness but the most stubborn form of strength. It doesn't demand you believe in miracles. It just asks that you see the miracle of a single moment, of a child learning to read, of a hand reaching across anger, of an old woman smiling at the sky because it's still beautiful, even after everything. Humanism finds the sacred in the everyday, in poetry and laughter, in science and song, in our endless aching questions. It honors the human mind not as a weapon, but as a lantern, something to light the path forward slowly, lovingly. Not perfect, but real. And when grief comes, and it always does, humanism doesn't offer distant comforts or stories of elsewhere. It stays with you, right here. It says, this hurts, and I can't take it away, but I will sit with you in the hurt. It teaches us that we are not alone, even when everything feels lost, that in our shared vulnerability we find a strange kind of strength. There is no promise in humanism that everything will turn out well, only that we can try to make things better. That we can learn from our mistakes, reach beyond our fears, and build a life of meaning, brick by humble brick. It doesn't pretend the world is kind, but it believes that we can be. And that belief, whispered gently in the dark, is sometimes all we need to go on. Imagine, if you will, a world built on this quiet faith, a world where dignity is not earned, but granted, where knowledge is not a weapon, but a gift, where difference is not feared, but embraced, where a person is not measured by what they believe, but by how they treat others. That world is not a dream. It is within reach. It begins in each conversation, each choice, each moment we choose understanding over judgment, dialogue over silence, empathy over indifference. And yes, humanism has its limits. It cannot shield us from pain. It cannot solve every crisis or fix every flaw. But it doesn't promise to. It simply invites us to walk this life with our eyes open, our hearts engaged, and our hands ready to help. As your breath slows now, as the night deepens, remember this: you are part of something ancient and extraordinary. The human story. A story of struggle, yes, but also of resilience, of wonder, of love. A story still being written. Humanism believes in you, not in some distant perfect version of you, but in the you who is here now. Tired maybe, uncertain, but trying, still trying. And in that trying, in that everyday courage to show up, to care, to hope, there is something sacred. So rest now. Let your heart ease. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to save the world. You only have to remember that you matter, that your life matters, that being human, just human, is more than enough. Good night, gentle soul. Sleep in the soft knowing that the light you carry, however small, helps keep this world human.